Just before the episode gets underway, I'd like to let you know that it's exactly 5 years now since the Reimagining Cyber podcast began, back in December 2020. There have been many changes in the cybersecurity landscape since then. What hasn't wavered is the support we've had from you, our loyal audience. So thanks for subscribing and following the podcast. And if you don't already, you know what to do. Now on with the show.
Hello and welcome to Reimagining Cyber. My name is Ben, and if you listen closely, you may be able to hear the faint ringing of jingling bells. Now, this means two things. Number one, I've raided the Reimagining Cyber sound effects closet, and number two, we are but days away from the very heart of the holiday season. However, as we've discussed before, this also means that it is peak season for cybercrime. Now, with me is our cybersecurity expert, Tyler Moffat. Tyler, how are you doing?
Doing really well. Excited for holiday season.
Now, let's dampen down that excitement a little bit, because you've recently talked about holiday scams from the victim perspective, but we're going to go a level deeper now this time. We're going to talk about the malware and the infrastructure that actually enables those scams, including a new info stealer called Santa Stealer. So if you could, let's start with some context. Why are we doing this?
Yeah, so great question. I mean, last time we focused on like the scams that people are seeing during the holidays, right? From the victim side, the phishing emails, fake delivery notices, clone charity pages, gift card scams, all that stuff, right? That's the visible side of the problem. What I want to talk about now is like what happens before any of that, right? So the malware, credential theft, info stealing activity that quietly enables those scams to work at scale, like so sort of underground foundation, if you will. You know, we're not looking at the holiday threats from the victim's point of view. We're looking at the infrastructure and tooling attacks that rely on, you know, the behind the scenes, if you will. Because most of these holiday scams, they don't just start with a message. They start with stolen access.
Now, that's an interesting distinction. So could you walk us through that a bit? Why does malware play such a big role in holiday cybercrime?
Honestly, info stealers, like seriously, they make the cybercrime ecosystem, engine, whatever you want to call it, work. They really are like the foundation of modern fraud. And it's only accelerated, honestly, the past few years. And that's what the government actually went after when they were trying to shut down things like in 2025, the biggest, you know, policing, I would say, Operation Endgame shut down and went after the info stealer market, the foundations, and they had a really good impact, but they bounced back. And anyway, these tools quietly infect systems. They steal things like safe browser passwords, authentication cookies, session tokens, that's a big one, crypto wallets, and, you know, sometimes stored payment information. But all that data gets bundled into what, you know, are basically called stealer logs, if that makes sense. These logs, stealer logs, they're sold, traded, reused, other criminal groups. I mean, they sell like hotcakes, especially during the holiday season. So when we see spikes in the account takeovers, you know, fraudulent purchases, fake shipping updates to the holidays, you know, we're often seeing the downstream of like impact of malware infections that usually happen like weeks earlier. That's seriously why this season is so dangerous, because the damage doesn't usually show up right away. It's usually in the new year.
Now, I mentioned Santa Stealer right at the top of the show, and if any name was ever designed to get headlines, it would be that. So what is it? Why is it getting attention right now?
Yeah, so Santa Stealer, it's sort of new, if that makes sense, off the market, obviously, from its name, its timing around the season. It didn't just show up earlier in the year, it shows up around now. But it's basically being marketed as malware as a service offering, right? It's showing up heavily in underground forums, Telegram channels, which are all the places where you buy this stuff, where those info stealer logs, you know, it lines up perfectly with the holiday shopping season. But its core capabilities include stealing browser credentials, cookies, session tokens, and crypto wallet data. Even gaming and message tokens and local files, that can actually have a value of return on investment, if you will. It's also, the Santa Stealer, it's very modular, meaning buyers can choose which features they want enabled, right? There are different pricing tiers. It's like a business model, you know, which lowers the barrier of entry, ultimately, for attackers who just want to run credential theft campaigns without building anything themselves. It's important to understand that Santa Steeler doesn't need to be technically sophisticated to be effective or have sort of broad underground appeal and, return on investment if you can sell your product, if you will, malware to all these affiliates of varying range of capabilities.
Yeah, interesting. So it's not like a cutting edge 0-day malware we're talking about.
Right. No, and that's the whole purpose is that it's not advanced, right? It's not some highly technical thing that only the top tier developers can leverage. No, like researchers have already noticed that it's fairly basic in places and detectable with modern security tooling, but accessibility matters more than sophistication here. That's what I was telling you about. And it also brings in the sales numbers, if that makes sense. So malware as a service, the purpose of it is that it really lowers the bar, right? The low skill actors to participate at cybercrime in scale, right? Combine that with the holidays when users are distracted, downplaying things quickly, clicking on deals, clicking on this, installing browser extensions for deals and coupons. I mean, you have the perfect storm, right? Attackers don't need perfection. They just need volume. And distraction helps, and this is the season of distraction.
So connect the dots for us, if you would. How does something like Santa Steeler turn into the scams that people actually experience?
So I was mentioned earlier, the session tokens. I think those are probably one of the most important things being stolen from Santa Steeler and just info stealers in general. But once the credentials and session tokens are stolen, attackers don't need to phish users anymore, okay? They can just directly log into retail accounts, delivery services, email platforms, even corporate systems, right? Because they are using legitimate session data, and that access often doesn't even trigger MFA or security alerts, right? So orders placed without warnings, shipping addresses changed, loyalty points drained, refund fraud, account takeovers that look completely normal. From the system's point of view, it's the real user. And during the holidays, when activity is already high, malicious behavior blends in more. And one thing I definitely want to call out here is those session tokens, they allow you to log in as the authenticated user, like you are the user, right? They persist through a password reset. I think I've mentioned it before, but that's like so huge right now that they persist through that.
So we talked a little bit about this last time when we covered this first, but why do we see such a spike in this activity during the holidays?
Yeah, there's a few reasons. First, users are distracted. We talked about that, right? They're shopping, tracking packages, responding quickly to messages, not scrutinizing downloads as easy, right? They're clicking on lots of things, installing lots of things, trying to get good deals. Second, organizations stretched very thin. Tons of vacations, reduced staffing, a lot of the times change or code freezes that limit how quickly teams can respond. And then third, info stealers thrive on delayed impact. So an endpoint infected in November might not really show any obvious signs of compromise until like late December, January, New Year, when they expect everybody to be off. And so additionally, finally, distribution becomes easier, right? Fake installers, malicious browser extensions, SEO, poisoned search results, all that stuff, pirated software, they all surge during the shopping season.
And we can never go over this too many times, but what should defenders be focusing on?
Yeah, I mean, you got to cover it. So first, treat browser data as sensitive. Those credentials, those cookies, those session tokens, and extensions, they're all high-value targets, right? Second, monitor for session abuse, not just password failures. Look for impossible travel, right? New device fingerprints, and unusual account behavior. And third, endpoint visibility does matter. Info stealers often execute quickly and clean up after themselves. If you don't have good telemetry, you may never know an infection occurred. They like to create persistence and like hooks in the registry, things like that. Fourth, user education needs to go beyond just phishing emails, right? This is about downloads, browser add-ons, crack software, fake installers. And lastly, identity protection is critical. Like seriously, identity is the new perimeter, I would say. Info stealers feed on account takeover, business email compromise, and cloud access abuse. Right, this is not just a consumer problem.
Tyler, fantastic. Now, just before we wrap things up, if there was one takeaway that listeners should take from this episode, what should it be?
Yeah, holiday cybercrime isn't just about holiday scams anymore, right? The real damage starts weeks earlier with malware quietly stealing credentials and sessions, by the time the scam shows up, the compromise may already be complete, right? If defenders only focus on what users see, they may miss what actually powers the threat.
Tyler, fantastic, great insights as always. And I think we're going to see you again next time we hear from you will be in the new year. So have a great Christmas and a great new year as well.
You as well, Ben. Thanks for having me on.
Now, the show will actually be back next week for the first of our two-part Reimagining Cyber review of the year. We're going to be kicking off by looking at the innovations, disruptions and technical threats that defined 2025. And guess what? That includes AI as well. What are the chances? So thanks for joining us and goodbye.